Welcome back to episode 3 of Call It Both Ways. My name's Kyle Wilson. This is my co-host Austin Winterberg. Glad to be back with you guys after an extremely busy week of basketball. Austin and I were just talking about before we came on. We love the fact that we're doing this and getting the opportunity to share some of our stories and the fun things and some of the not so fun things of officiating. But man, this week was even more difficult to find time with both of us working 5 nights this week for you, right?
Yep.
And I had 6 straight, including a Wednesday makeup high school game. So definitely feeling the wear and tear this week, but we're glad to be here. We've got some fun stuff to share with you. Austin's going to go over the play we had mentioned or that was posted on Facebook. And then we're actually got some fan questions we're going to go over for the first time. So on that note, if you ever do have questions or you've seen a funky play or whatever the case may be, always feel free to send those in. Austin, our email is, remind me.
Call it both ways ref.
Call it both ways ref at gmail.com. All right, and before we get started, we want to remind you that we are sponsored by our friends at Sports Officiating Supplies. If you happen to need anything uniform-wise, accessories, whistles, bags, any of that thing like that, they've got you covered. So from Pee-wees to pros, Sports Officiating Supplies is your source for all things referee. They offer uniforms for 16 different state associations as well as NCAA apparel. As a certified Smitty dealer, they offer a wide selection of uniforms for 8 different sports at competitive prices with personalized customer service. Owned and operated by active officials, we want you to make your first great call. Visit them online at sportsofficiatingSupplies.com/discount/both ways, and you'll get 10% off of your basketball apparel or accessories.
Hey, it's a great deal right there.
Absolutely.
Save anywhere you can. Anywhere you can. Now, if you were tuning into Facebook at all this week, posted a small play about free throws. We all love free throws. Free throws win basketball games, right? Something like that. Win championships, isn't that what they say?
Mm-hmm. I thought that was defense, but some coaches might feel like it's free throws.
Maybe it is free throws. Defense, I think it's more defense, but either way, we talked about free throws, and the play was basically we have a shooter that has the ball. They're about to shoot the free throw, and the defense steps into the lane before they shoot. And after they shoot, the shooter completely misses the rim. So an air ball is what we call it. And now we have 2 different violations. And a lot of the question then becomes, does one matter more than the other? Do we have both of them? What do we do? And it really just depends on what exactly happens. In this particular situation, this specific situation, we're going to enforce both violations. So the defensive violation and the offensive violation for the shooter missing. If it's the first free throw out of however many free throws, then you move on to the next free throw. If there's no more free throws remaining, then we go to the good old arrow. Yeah. We go look at the table and we go in the direction of the alternating possession arrow. Now, the reason I say it gets confusing, or it could be different depending on the situation, is because let's say the defense steps in early, and then an offensive player that's right next to the defensive player in the lower lane spaces also steps in with them. Then the offensive player stepping in, we ignore that second one. We get the first one. It's only if it's a defensive player first and then the shooter violating, or an offensive player behind the shooter violating, that we're gonna actually report both of them. So it gets confusing, and I know if some of you were waiting on that answer, there it is. We're gonna report both of them.
One of those again that if you haven't seen, and we talked about like the scoring on the wrong basket play last week, one of those if you haven't seen, or maybe just like really dug into and read a lot in the case book or in the rule book, I would have no clue if I'd seen that for the first time and had never read that or seen it.
It's a confusing play for sure.
A lot of people. Go ahead.
I've had it once, I think.
A lot of people don't realize how quickly some of those. I mean, you could be talking about milliseconds, split seconds on those. You're talking about ignoring maybe the second one in a different scenario. That's really, really quick to be able to judge sometimes.
You're right. I think that's a good point to make too, is that when things do get hectic, or when you have a intricate play, layered play as we call it, where there's this thing happened and this thing happened and this thing happened, I think it's important to remember we can always slow down. You know, talk it through, get together, send the players to their benches if we have to. And if I know some people don't really mention this a whole lot, but if all three of us, the referees, are having a conversation and we can't look at the players need to be sent to their benches. I know we don't talk about that a whole lot, but if there's just two of us having a conversation and one of us can watch the players, that's one thing. You can leave them out there. But if all three of us are having to come together and talk about a play like this, or any type of crazy situation, we need to make sure that we're sending them to their benches too, so nothing crazy happens.
I've had that actually in a college game last week where you're talking about slowing down, just multiple layered play like you just mentioned, and I am the world's worst about. I don't know if it has to do with my anxiety or what, but when things like that happen, my mind is running 100 miles an hour, and usually my mouth follows. But I had to tell a partner, like, hey, if that ever happens and I skip a step or you're confused about what I just said I had, just tell me to slow the heck down. And I'm the world's worst about it, but I tried it. That's something I have very much tried to get better about, specifically this season. I tried to be intentional about slowing down. They have to wait on us.
That's right. That's right. They're always waiting on us.
Sometimes to a fault, but I mean it's just the easiest way to get things right. I think those awkward pauses are things that we all hate, but if it means we get it right, then I think everybody can agree we'd rather have that awkward pause.
Definitely. I'd rather go home at the end of the night knowing that I took the time to get the right outcome versus just rushing through it.
For sure. And I think,
something.
especially when you bring in like a monitor, we work with in Division II and obviously in Division I games, that can get even fuzzier. When do we not? Obviously, the rules decide a lot of that, but that can be another thing. Like, do we hesitate to shut a play down real quick to go check it out and make sure we got it right? I think we should always err on the side of doing our best to get it right.
Yeah, true. And that's, like you said, when, what, how, all those questions come into play. And then when you do go look at it, not only are you looking at the play itself, but you're looking at everything else, the time, the shot clock. I mean, everything comes into play with stuff like that. I do kind of want to go back because we have had quite a crazy week. What have you done in regards to resting and recovering? Because I know you were talking about questions. I think I saw that we had a question from, I think it was Bobby in Oklahoma. Does that sound right?
Yes.
That asked about resting and recovering after games. So what have you done this week?
For me personally, that is difficult, and I think you're kind of in the same boat when we get home. It is not just that we get to shut the switch off and do nothing but rest and relax. We've got families, young kids especially, that I try to remember that it's not me being gone and me being busy has nothing to do with them, so that's not their fault. So I still try to be energetic dad when I get home. So when they aren't awake, like right now, everybody's asleep, usually just try to do next to nothing. Drink a lot of water to try to help recover. There's times where I've got really bad lower back issues for whatever reason. That may include like a heating. That feels like it for sure. At 31, it doesn't feel like it should be necessary, but I think I've had 2 stints of it this basketball season already where Thermacare or Tiger Balm were my friends for sure. So that could be anywhere from some heat, using a massager gun if my legs are sore enough. Tomorrow for sure, after a 6-night week like this week, I will absolutely be laying or sitting in an Epsom salt bath for a while. That seems to do a lot. I've also, something I'm interested in, I've seen some of our Division I friends have I don't even know what they're called, but they're like sleeves that go around your legs. That I think massage and also maybe heat and cool. Maybe if I can get to their level at some point, I can get myself a set of those.
Yeah, I want to say those are pretty pricey, like
probably
$700. Yeah, something like that. But I think it'd be worth it.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I know the big thing you're talking about, drinking water. I've done a lot of that. Now, not right now. I'm splurging on some soda. But
I'll be honest, I'm not. My wife will be the first to tell you I am the world's worst about drinking water. I like some things to be flavored, so usually it's like Gatorade if it's not soda at home. But I try to do my best with water.
Yeah, try. It's hard to do sometimes. It's hard to do, but I'm kind of the same as you. You get home, I mean, don't get to just shut it off immediately. Luckily for me, my girlfriend comes with the girls sometimes. They've been coming to games and whatnot this year and getting to kind of see that because they are getting a little bit older and getting to the point where they can sit in the stands and control themselves a little bit better. So it's been cool to see their faces even when I'm on the road. But even getting home, the film watching, on top of the doing everything else, the household stuff, we're still working doing this even when we're not doing this.
Yep.
This podcast, like you said, we want to help others get better. We want to give them information that they might not hear from someone else, or they may not read somewhere else, or somebody may not be willing to tell them XYZ. So this is tiring too, but I think this kind of comes with the rest portion too, because we get to have a cool conversation, just talk about what we've done in the week, the rules, things like that our mind isn't really, I would say, working 100%. I guess we're getting to kind of rest while we're sitting here, but at the same time, not pushing ourselves to just kill ourselves is the best way. Overdo it. Nobody wants to overdo it. I always want to have fun whenever I step on the floor officiating. I don't ever want to just get it to where my legs are just running a number. I still get excited every single time we walk out. So I want it to stay that way.
For sure. I would say film, well, you mentioned film a minute ago. It's not really part of what I consider R&R after the games, but that's one of the things we can't reiterate enough. Watch your games. Whether it's high school, junior high, it doesn't matter what it is. Film never lies. You can see things like your judgment, play calling, and things like that. I think one of the biggest things that has helped me from watching pretty much every one of my games, because like we said, almost everything's streamed by now. I think the biggest thing is just the little things. Aesthetically, your run, your signals, things like that, floor coverage, where you're standing, how you move, all those things that may seem little in and of themselves, but when you add them all up, can take you from here to here very, very quickly. So I can't really say exactly how important watching film is. Breaking down, Austin and I are really good about sending plays back and forth. Like we mentioned today, we both had college games at separate places. By the time I think we both finished around 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock hits, and we've already got plays already shared back and forth. Before I go to bed tonight, I've already watched that game once. Before I go to bed tonight, I will have watched it another time. That's not to brag or anything like that. It's something I am proud of, we've mentioned, but something that we would love to see become common theme amongst our fellow officials. And in college, it's pretty prominent. Most everybody's watching film. High school, I don't feel like I see it as much or hear about it as much.
Yeah, definitely don't hear about it as much for sure. But even like you said, everybody's streaming nowadays for the most part. I mean, I would say over 50% of my games, if not even higher than that, are live streamed somewhere where I can go catch it after the fact.
Yep. And I would say especially for high school officials, before live stream and YouTube and Facebook became a big thing, especially around COVID, I would walk out, especially to coaches that I didn't know. If it was ones that I knew, I'd just shoot them a text after the game and send them my email and ask for the film. Usually most of them would upload it to Huddle or something like that. Mm-hmm. But walk out with a piece of paper to a coach that you don't know, introduce yourself like you typically would whenever in pregame, hand them that and ask them before the game, because you don't know how the game's about to go before emotions get high. Just tell them, hey, I like to watch a lot of film. After the game, sometime tomorrow, whenever you get a chance, would you please send this to me? And a lot of times, number one, obviously that's going to be good for you to be able to break down film after your game, but you're going to get a reputation amongst coaches for being the guy or gal to be asking for film. Oh man, they care enough about what they're doing to want me to send them film. I like that.
Yep, that's how mine was. I was always sending emails or asking the signers to get it for me if I wasn't supposed to send an email to the coach, or whatever your assigner's rules are for the league. I will say on the watching film aspect, make sure that if you are watching film and you've never watched film before and you're curious on what you want to look at, you really want to look at plays that you think you may have missed, or plays that you may have got wrong on the floor, plays that are the bad plays, basically, is the best way to put it. We don't want to look at Now, you can look at some good plays. Look at some good plays that you got right. Know why you got those plays right. But don't just watch your whole game only looking at the plays you got right, saying, oh, look at me, patting yourself on the back, saying all the plays. Because the objective of us watching film is to say, okay, was I in the wrong position when this play happened? How could I have seen this play better so that next time it happens, I will get the play right and I'm not going to miss it? So I think that it's a really important part of watching film is to find the plays. It's a human part of officiating, is that we're not perfect and we can miss plays. And so when you get to go back and watch it on film, you can kind of get a better idea of where you should be standing, how you can make your presence more known. Do you need to run in? Do you need to go separate something? Do you need to stand there for a second and diffuse the situation if two kids are going at it? And so I think that's a big part to make sure to mention for anybody that may have never watched film before and kind of curious what they should be looking for.
And if you happen to be listening to this and that describes you haven't been one to get into film much, don't ever hesitate. If we've mentioned mentors, any of your friends in officiating, if you specifically want Austin and I to break down some plays, I don't care if I don't know you. If you're a fellow official, you want to message me a play, we've made a common friend that we've talked about a few times. I won't mention his name, but that is now, I don't know the guy from Adam, never met him in person. We exchange clips almost daily. I've been messaging him back and forth for like 2 weeks, and it's somebody else like, you can't have enough eyeballs on your film. Obviously, you want to hear from the people where we want to get to and see what they have to say and hear their opinions on plays and things like that, but it never hurts to bounce plays back and forth with people at your own level, whether it be middle school or high school, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, you can never have too many people looking at plays. Now, I will say, take what some people say to you with a grain of salt, and you don't have to argue with people. You don't have to rebuttal. You can just say, okay, thank you. If you're sending clips and you're asking for feedback, be humble and ready to accept the feedback that comes your way.
Be open to criticism, for sure.
Yeah, definitely be open to the criticism, because you might hear something that you've never heard before. You might hear something you disagree with, and in the officiating world, take the feedback, listen to it, apply it if you can, and move on. That's kind of how it works. So,
great advice going into camp season as well. You're going to hear things that may or may not fit into the way you do things. We talk about tool belts. There may be some things you hear about that are good to add into your tool belt, some that may not be. But one thing I've learned thankfully from observation and never from my own experience, don't cut off people that are your senior in officiating. Whether you agree with what they're saying or not, they've got more. They definitely have more wisdom, more experience, and just let them share that. Apply what you can and move on. Because inserting yourself is not going to do anything for you. Before we get back to some fan questions, I thought it might be important to mention something really cool that we got to do this week at a high school game. So we've talked about some different experiences for not only just fellow officials, but maybe even for fans and coaches that would give you a different perspective on what we do. And we actually got approval from one of our high school assigners to live record, I guess not live, but we recorded and mic'd ourselves up for a high school game. We're working on, Austin is working on editing some of that, but already having gone back and listened to it, there's really, really cool stuff, and we're hoping that in the future we can make that a thing to where at least a handful of games here and there we're able to record and share some of our conversations and communications with players and coaches, kind of give you a first-hand look at what it's like to do what we do, other than just from the stands or seeing film or plays or things like that. You actually get to hear some of the conversations we have throughout the games.
Yeah, I will tell you, just kind of going through, and I know you've listened to it, but just going through and getting to hear us after the fact, how we're interacting when we have, a foul and we're shooting free throws, or if we have subs coming in, or just a basic interaction with a coach where they have a question on a play. It was just really neat to hear it from that perspective after the fact.
Yeah.
I think when you're in the moment, sometimes you don't realize even sometimes how you answered a question or how you responded to something, you just kind of, you just click and you do it. And so it was neat. It was really neat for me to get a glance, I guess, into how those conversations were going, kind of what my body language was like, what everything was like during the conversation.
That's even for us, because even when we review our own film, it's just that bird's eye view and the audio from either an announcer if they have one, or sometimes it's literally just the audio from the gym. But you don't actually hear any of those conversations for ourselves when we review ourselves from film. So it is cool to be able to match those, like hear what I said, see what it looked like, what your body language was like. Really cool perspective for sure, and hopefully we're able to continue doing that. I think it went really well. Coaches were great about it. But so it was really fun on our part. I hope it's something we can continue doing.
Going from that 2-man working JV, working junior high basketball, lower level varsity to varsity, small college, whatever it may be, hearing those little tidbits of, I got your shooter, hey, just making small talk with the players, just whatever the case may be. That's kind of I don't know, it's a huge part of the game, but it's not a part that we get to hear a lot of. So
it'll be a really good teaching tool. I know for me, coming up as a younger official, I was 99% of the time with my dad and his long-time partner. So most of the stuff I learned, I was just picking up on the fly. I wasn't into camps or anything like that, and there definitely wasn't anything like this where I could listen into more veteran officials and just hear just like in college, I've gone through the same process. This is all new stuff, how to communicate, things you do and don't do, rather than just learning on the fly. Now people will have a tool to be able to see what those things are like and then apply them to their own games without having to learn it in the middle of a game.
Or because I know some people just don't want to ask questions. I know that there's just people out there that just feel awkward about asking a question, or feel like it might be stupid to ask that question. And in officiating, no question is a stupid question. If you have a question you don't know, just ask. Somebody will be willing to tell you or get you an answer, especially us. So I know that we'll do what we can to make sure any question that is asked is answered best we can.
I tell my students all the time, don't hesitate to ask questions. I'm supposed to be the expert, but if I don't know, I'm just going to tell you I don't know, and then I'll figure out the answer for you, or someone that does know it.
I'll go find the expert.
All right, let's get back to some fan questions. Let's see what we've got. From Joe in Wisconsin. What do you do in your free time to escape the stresses of officiating? So, Austin, do you have any hobbies, or what are some of the things you do, whether it's during the season or maybe even in the off season?
I actually love to cook with my girlfriend. That's probably the biggest thing. When the kids go to sleep, just kind of making something random, like a food they won't eat. We do that after we've cooked their dinner. We'll come back later for us and then cook something together. That's kind of a big stress relaxation for me, because I don't think about anything except what we're doing in that time. Same with just taking my kids out to do something. Whenever I'm doing stuff with them, I don't know. It just, you don't think about the other things. You're just focused in the in and now, what's going on with life. Not worried about work or your work times 2, your refereeing, which is, second job. So I think the biggest thing is for family for me, probably. Just hang out with family. That's probably the best way to get away from the stress of officiating.
For me, it's golf. It's been a go-to since high school for sure, but same thing, kind of same idea. I'm out alone for one most of the time if I'm not playing with friends, but just a good chance to not have to worry about anything else except for hitting that little white ball and chasing it.
Yeah, if mine didn't go in the pond every time, but you know how that goes.
Mine's hit or miss. I can still throw up a little 74 or 75 here and there. It might be 94 or 95.
About to say, that's when you're sleeping or playing Wii Sports.
Oh, that's funny. All right. We got a couple more fan questions and we'll wrap this up. Let's go with this one. Do you prefer, this one comes from Brindle in Oklahoma, and actually an officiating buddy. Do you prefer to have your family in attendance at games that you officiate?
I mean, I'll start with this one because they've been coming with me a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it. I mean, it doesn't bother me. We have a good understanding that when they come to games, there's not much I'm going to be able to do to help, unfortunately. And we're not going to be able to interact much as well, just because, I have a job to do. I'm there working. And so I like seeing them. I like hearing them have a good time, especially the little ones, seeing them happy and just cheering for all the kids. They don't care who wins. They're so little. They don't know who's what. But just seeing them have a good time is definitely enjoyable for me. I don't think they really understand the concept of officiating yet. They know that I'm a referee.
Right.
They know kind of what a referee is, but I think they just like being out in a public space, hearing all the loud noises, and so it doesn't bother me. I like it.
For me,
So
it's a big fat no. For college games, I'll say it's not a big deal, and that's why I feel like most of the ones you're talking about, they've come to your college games. High school, you just don't know what's going to happen. I've seen a lot of things. We won't get into the specifics, but from being followed to your vehicle, threatened. I can remember one of my early, and this isn't a bad one or anything, but one of my earliest memories as a kid was following Dad to work a state tournament and working a quarter or semifinal game with two very emotional schools, I'll put it that way. The players and coaches, everybody involved. There were a lot of technicals in this one game, and at one point, I think I was in third grade, and I was with one of my dad's buddies that he had kind of put in charge of me during his game, and these fans are all screaming all the things you can imagine they're saying, and I, as a dumb third grader, turned around and said something to one of them. That's my dad. Don't say anything about him.
Oh,
the can, gummy bears, Skittles, everything you can imagine started getting thrown. But ideally, sure. Like I've mentioned that to Ashley a lot of times. Like I would love for you to come to my games. Sometimes it does get lonely on the road. Don't think about that. We're alone a lot, whether it's you're traveling to and from, even during the games, unless we're in a timeout or something like that where we get together and get a chance to talk. You're basically isolated by yourself. Like yes, we work as a team, but you're on your own. We don't talk a lot throughout the games. That's tough. I want them to be at games. It's just not worth the risk. There's also the health risk factors for my girls and stuff like that. So it's not worth risking a hospital stay for them to come to my games. But then on the big thing for me is safety. If I can't guarantee that for them, it's a big fat no. But like we mentioned, college games, it's usually not a big deal at all.
No, that's definitely a good way to look at it. Now we'll kind of go back into what you were talking about the fans, the gummy bears, Skittles, getting stuff thrown at you.
I feel like in 13 years I've seen it all.
I see that we did have one question that kind of trickles into that, and we can kind of close on this. But Chris from Arkansas asked us where the best hospitality was.
Oh, that's a good question.
Basketball. Okay, and so I will start and say that it really just depends. And it would be very, 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 very difficult for me to just pick a best. Because, how do I put this? The smaller the school, the better the hospitality. And the bigger the school, the lower the hospitality. In general, this is been my personal experience in Arkansas. That the smaller the town, the smaller the school, a lot of the times it's... They'll help you out, get whatever you need, Gatorade, Powerade, a soda, something to eat because we had to miss dinner to get there for the game,
right.
Something to snack on, whatever the case may be. A lot of the bigger schools, it's just, 3 bottles of water for the girls' game, 3 bottles of water for the boys' game, and if you run out, you could probably get more, but you're going to have to hunt somebody down to ask for some more water. And so, talking about hospitality, it really varies, and also, I say that to say not every big school is like that. Mm-hmm. There are some big schools that take care of you. But the majority of the time, the smaller the school, the better the hospitality.
I think my mind goes to, and typically like your regular season games, it's appreciated, not something I necessarily expect. Give me some water and maybe a candy bar or something, not the biggest deal. Mm-hmm. My mind, when I hear that question, my mind goes to our holiday tournaments because that's typically where you see the spreads. Throughout the season, not a big deal, but love me some holiday tournament hospitality rooms. My mind goes to, and you've worked in Arkansas a little longer than I have, but there's usually 3 or 4 high school holiday tournaments that go on around Fort Smith. And the first that comes to mind would definitely be Alma when they had a tournament that it doesn't exist anymore. But when they did, my goodness, everything you can imagine, from the entree to sides to desserts, almost enough to, especially a lot of those days we double dip where we call a set somewhere and then drive and go call two more somewhere else at another tournament. Almost to the point, like, a few times I can remember I thought about calling assigners, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make this second set because I'm so full. No, Alma comes to mind. Ozark's always a solid one for their holiday tournament. I've gotten to work the Coke Classic a few times the last couple of years. Always taken care of well there. Mansfield as well. Always has a great hospitality. So we're definitely taking care of those tournaments. Regular season stuff, like I said, for me anyways, it's not the biggest deal. Give me some water and a candy bar. But I will say you are 100% correct from what I've experienced. That a lot of times those smaller schools, for whatever reason, I don't know where that comes from, but just the small town feel and hospitality, I guess. But I was at a Class B, which is as small as it gets in Oklahoma. I was at a Class B school this week, and before I left, I had been offered everything in the concession stand, other stuff from this. This was coming straight from the superintendent as well. So that's something you don't necessarily see at some of the bigger schools as well. Good question though. There's one more I wanted to get to before we can close on this one.
I'm good.
Let me pull it up. I just lost it. Does working, this applies to both of us, and I think a lot of our lower level, when I say lower level, anything below college, a lot of officials like ourselves are working multiple sports. So this definitely applies to both of us. Does working multiple sports make you a better basketball referee? And this came from Brent in California.
100%. I think that other sports allow you to focus on other aspects of your game that you may not be focusing on as much while you're doing basketball. For instance, in football, you might be a line judge or a head linesman, and you might be on the sideline right next to a coach. And you may not be the best communicator. You may not be able to have a solid conversation or have a rule book based conversation with a coach. But when you're on the sideline, you're going to learn, or you're going to be put into some situations where you don't know what to do if you haven't learned. And so I think that, yes, 100% it makes me better because it allows me to focus on, like when I do football, I can focus on this, whereas I may not be focusing on that as much whenever I'm doing basketball.
I'd say the same thing. Communication is the first thing that comes to mind. For me, basketball being what I consider my bread and butter and my favorite thing to officiate, I look at it as my softball and my football are helping me get better for basketball season. Whether it's communication with coaches, players, administration, whatever the case may be. As far as obviously the rules don't translate, but taking care of business before, during, and after, that doesn't change between sports. Yeah, for sure. I think that's just the easy answer is communication is the biggest thing that translates between all sports that I work.
Oh, yeah, 100%. But then the overall answer to the question is yes. More sports, more outlooks on how you do things, more opportunities. I mean, it's just definitely helps.
All right, and that is it for our fan questions. I would say looking forward to next week. We're still working on the film from our mic'd up high school game. Still working on a couple of interviews. We are waiting to hear back for approval on a couple. That is a lot more difficult process for our upper level officials in Division I and especially in the NBA than you could probably imagine. But definitely want to be sure that they don't get themselves in trouble just to help us out.
Yeah, but hopefully we'll have something soon. I mean, I know eventually we'll have something. Hopefully it's enjoyable to everybody that gets to watch it.
And educational. All right, before we call it good, number one, remember to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. That's the best way to help us spread the word. We have a lot of plans with what we want to do with this to hopefully help out in recruiting and retaining officials. That's one of the best ways you can help us, simply by subscribing on YouTube. So go smash that subscribe button.
Oh, yes.
And before we call it good, we want to remind you one last time that we are sponsored by our friends at Sports Officiating Supplies. Anything you need, they've got you covered. I've still got to go make that softball order, or I'm going to have a different shirt than my college softball officiating friends. That's going to look kind of weird. Got to get on top of that. But no, go see our friends at Sports Officiating Supplies. From Pee-wees to pros, Sports Officiating Supplies is your source for all things referee. They offer uniforms for 16 different state associations, as well as NCAA apparel. As a certified Smitty dealer, they offer a wide selection of uniforms for 8 different sports at competitive prices with personalized customer service. Owned and operated by active officials, we want you to make your first great call. Visit them online at sportsofficiatingsupplies.com. Don't forget, if you want that 10% discount, put in /discount/ both ways at the end of the website. Austin, you got anything else?
No, thanks again for joining us if you made it this far, and we'll see you next time on Call It Both Ways.